Hi there, everyone. As we know, at the African Futures Academy, we are always talking to interesting people with designs on the future that makes us think about things differently. And today we're talking to Chuma Niklaas, an innovation and technology graduate, an aspiring futurist and entrepreneur with designs on enhancing human health and longevity through technology. Let's take a look at some of the interesting things he has to say and what he's working on for the future. Hi, everybody. Today we're talking to Chuma Niklaas. He's a graduate with a BCom in Innovation and Technology, and he's really interested in entrepreneurship and future studies. So, Chuma, tell me a little bit about how you actually got into or involved and interested in future studies, because I know it's not something that's widely spread. Not a lot of people are really even know what it's about.
It actually started out with my starting out from, let's say, high school, when I was mostly interested in ever since I got involved in doing, when working in the junior city council, and also and I was someone very much an introverted person, but I always wanted to do something where, how do I benefit society in a way through my work, and also through finding meaning in what you do. And funny enough, I was like, okay, maybe maybe I'll be something like a doctor, or maybe a lawyer. The typical jobs that you think of, like, oh, when you think of success. And then I sort of like going more into like, okay, like reading about more about technology. And a big influence for me was mostly reading Ray Kurzweil's book, The Future is Near. The Singularity is Near, and also Abundance by Peter Diamandis. And I thought, okay, I really want to get into the world of futures and technology. And at first I didn't know what exactly was the specific field of future studies and also futurology as a whole. But I essentially wanted to go into this field more, but more from a tech-based perspective. And that's when I kind of got into when I studied at AFTO at the BCom School of Innovation and Technology. At first, I was like, okay, this is an interesting route to go. But then I kind of through the course and the way it's structured, very practical, and also going through a lot of things about design thinking. I'm like, okay, this is like how I can fit in all of these. Like I had very much like interests that were going all over the place. So I was interested, even though my main interest was mostly in medicine and biotech, but I also liked things in automation, future of education, and all of these new grand ideas and concepts moving forward in the fourth industrial revolution. And I kind of thought, and then that's when I also discovered future studies, also through the learning about what they have at the University of Stellenbosch, which is the future studies course. I'm like, okay, this is actually something that I want to do, actually becoming a futurist. How do you forecast these various, actually forecasting scenarios, and also building up those scenarios up to scale? And one of the big epiphanies that I had, where I felt a bit more confident about some of the more radical ideas that I had, was coming in second place at a biotech hackathon. It was actually during my second year. And from there, I actually wanted to build up on that concept, and also building up those sorts of relationships, and also getting the sort of expertise needed to build up on this concept. And it's very, and I also noticed a lot of gaps that we have as well, especially with people under, like you said, a lot of people are still coming to awareness within this space, especially when it comes to design thinking. And also, like, how do you be more future conscious as well, especially when it comes to complex problem solving. And I think regarding a lot of the issues that we face here locally that are very topical for here within Africa and South African, there's a lot of underlying complexity that is needed that is involved as well. So you can't really solve it by thinking, okay, do we need to imitate what's in the West, or do we need to do like the way in the way the Asian tigers have done it? Like do we follow those sorts of economic models? It's South Africa has unique and and also Africa as a whole is very unique and very uh, um, issues that it has, and also due to its history, but also very much it's also in a uniquely has a lot of unique opportunities as well. And how do we adapt into this coming fourth industrial revolution? Sorry, I'm someone who tends to
No,
ramble a lot,
I love
but
to see a young person thinking about all these things in these ways, and you have such a variety of different interests that you're trying to bring together in your work. And I also read somewhere you call yourself a futurist and a transhumanist, and you have a
Yes.
lot of interest in synthetic biology and that kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about what's transhumanism. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with the term as well.
All right. So essentially, transhumanism is a philosophical and also it's and a philosophical movement or philosophy where it's how do we use the overlying ideas? How do we use technology to essentially uplift the human condition, reduce suffering, eliminate disease, and also surpass various human limitations? It's very much a futuristic or futuristic train of thought as well. So there's a lot of various ideas, like for example, do the more one of the more extremely radical ones is like saying, do we use like looking into life extension, like we use technology to make ourselves live longer because, say for example, with medicine now we've been able to live much longer. Modern medicine, we've been able to live much longer lives. Where, like in the past, like living beyond the age of 40 was like your chances were pretty slim, but but now and I'm very excited. And for me, I'm most excited on the biological front, and medicine is like we're moving more into more personalized medicine, and how do you build that to scale is looking into how do you improve those sorts of systems. But moving more on transhumanism, I like this one specific train of thought is looking into super intelligence, super longevity, and super wellness, because you kind of need all three of those things. Like if you want to what's the point of living longer if you're not living life to the fullest? Like I think super longevity would be more on the medicine side of things, and wellness would be more on psychological wellness, also physical wellness, and also how do we as a society grow as well. So it's more so wellness is, I think, from a wellness side of things, is that's the kind of the most interesting. How do we build systems that allow people to live better lead better lives? So which is also why I like the future of education and what is going to be the future of that. Also the future of education and also the future of work, essentially.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting questions that come up in my mind when you mention these things, especially, living in Africa. And I
Yes.
wonder, about access and whether there
Mm.
will be some divide, about when it comes to longevity and super intelligence. Will everybody have access to this, or is it going to discriminate more? How do you see that unfolding here where we are?
I think yes, that is actually a very important question, and it's one that, especially when you're thinking about, especially from a futures perspective, when you're thinking about how you want to implement change, whether as an organization or as a team, the one thing that you always need to do is you need to consider what are the sort of ramifications of what's of how other this sort of change, or how this um, how this technology or how the societal change will impact others. Funny enough, I was in a conversation regarding this sort of topic yesterday, and it was really fascinating. And I think I really love this term, is like, how do you create participatory futures as well? um, and basically, and how I understand it, and from what I've learned through college, is that you always need to, especially within this hyper connected society, you don't want to make people feel like change is being done to them, rather that change or the future, they are part of that change. And that is why it's also important that you always involve when you're coming up with solutions or trying to solve a problem. Always try to get the people that you're trying to impact, get them involved in the process, make them like, if you kind of, for example, getting them, whether it's in the iterative process, getting them actually involved, or making them feel like, okay, how can they input in how we solve this problem. And regarding to the issue of access, and I think that's also, access is also very much an important thing, because ideally we want to get to an age of in an age of abundance, where unfortunately, we're kind of now in the tipping point where we tend to always tends to think of things in terms of scarcity. And I think that is one of the major reasons. It's also why there's a lot of, it's one of the contributing factors to some of the societal and economic issues that we face today as well. Even though there are a lot more other complex factors that go into it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, definitely.
and so the one thing that needs to be done is like from either from we have to think about also how we also need to think about how we change our institutions and how they need to be more conscious about the people that they're affecting, and how do we roll this out in a socially responsible way and also being more informed. And also you also need to get the public also involved as well, and how do we get them to be more, have them have a voice, and also how can they have voice and action as well when it comes to these sorts of changes now, especially when we live in very interesting times where democracy as a concept is really being tested, and also within this pandemic as well. Um, so these are sort of like the important questions that we always have to think about as well. So um, and coming up with answers or solutions is always based on like coming on from that top down approach and trying to think of, okay, how do we picture this scenario, and sometimes we also have to think about, okay, how can things go really bad, and how do we try to minimize those risks.
Yeah, I think a participatory approach to futures is the most important thing, especially getting young people involved. You know, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And we need more people to understand that. Everybody needs to know and think about the futures and what's out there and what's coming and how we can change course if we need to, and just basically design the future the way we want to. And I mean, we have lots of things to solve and do differently here. And you mentioned also, you know, you're very involved with exponential technologies and how that might help us here in Africa. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that. What is exponential technologies? What are the most important ones for you, and what can we expect from that?
All right. This is something that I feel very strongly about, and especially with exponential technologies, how I would define exponential technologies is technology. These are technologies that have the highest growth factor that can majorly, and these are essentially, and this might sound hyperbolic, but these are essentially the technologies that have major amounts of growth, and also from years to come, they'll increment exponentially and have a major impact on the future and radically change society as a whole. And we're already seeing some of them already um, taking that effect, especially when we're looking into data, artificial intelligence, and also the Internet of Things. Those are some of the major ones. The other ones are the one that I'm mostly excited about, or the one that I'm always thinking about the most. It is actually the impact of nanotechnology, but that one has a long way. That's kind of one that's also more in its deceptive, kind of more in its incremental phase, where that just means that there is a lot of hype around it, but it hasn't reached, or it hasn't it's still a lot of there's still a lot of research that needs to be done in that field, especially because I'm most excited what it means for diagnostics, and also for drug delivery as well. But I think another exciting thing about especially one that's mostly relevant in today's context is looking, especially within the which is also more topical within the pandemic, is also like connected, is also communications technology. So, and a lot of people have been saying it for a while, like we do need to think about more about telepresence and how do we conduct meetings, and also on an education front. And the way I think I wrote it down there, the way I envision, I think the education system as a whole, just even on a global level, and it's also kind of a universal problem. It needs a major overhaul on how we teach. How do we teach our the next generation? And because I think the way we've been doing it is it has had it has been the most practical, but it's also at the same time it's becoming less and less practical now, with especially now as the world is becoming a lot more complex. Um, like it is, I think it's completely ridiculous that we say that um, let's say for example at a grade 10 level that we have to say, all right, you need to know, you have to pick out your subjects right now, you need to have like this roadmap of what your future is like. and i and I don't think, as it is now, high school doesn't, or education, it doesn't provide the amount of room um, for students and kids to understand, to kind of get a good understanding of what they want to do, kind of giving them that space, because everyone is taught the same, and we kind of realizing that, wait, not everyone thinks exactly, or has this sort of strength, or they don't think, not everyone thinks the same. So the way I picture education is, I definitely envision it being something more individualized, and where, thanks to technology and also, these various online courses, I definitely picture where teachers are more like, act like coaches or facilitators, where we're able to teach kids more efficiently based on what interests them or where they mostly strongly aligned. So I think that's also one of the most important things. But the most critical thing is mostly, how do we teach our students to be more create, I think teaching them design thinking and create complex problem solving at a younger age is very crucial, and so that they understand complexity, and also working within, also how to work with people who are different from them as well.
Yes, I think those are some of the most important skills, now, especially going through this rapid change that we're going through. Um, and also context, right? We want them to be problem solvers, but in
Yes.
an African context. And
Okay.
you mentioned that in the beginning, not just copying the West. So I asked this question to everybody: what does it mean in your eyes, or to you, to be African? What does that mean for us?
I think it and I think this is actually it is a very difficult question to answer, because you need to really think about it. And I've taken some time to think, and it for me it just means epitomizing the principles of Ubuntu, or humanity, and how do you essentially be how do you how do you become more connected with, with the person next to you, or your neighbor as well, and how do we create this, how do we create, being part of, this African community, which is so rich with, with history and so many diverse people, and just work, and just like, despite, the superficial differences between us, is how do we collaborate in various in a very collaborative relationships, instead of, being divided, essentially. So um, we might be different in various ways, but we all are interconnected, and sort of one humanity as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's also very important. I mean, in a lot of cultures, it's very individualized. We're always looking at individual success and the future and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But in Africa, it's very much a collective effort,
Yeah.
collective success that we're striving for.
Yeah.
And I mean, and to that end, you're a new graduate. Things are very difficult with the job market now. You have all this knowledge, all this great things you've learned with this interesting degree that you have, which wasn't available when I was there. So, what are your plans for the future? Do you plan to do with all this exciting knowledge you've gained?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, like, thanks to lockdown, a lot of the plans that I did have in mind. Okay, plans always change. Things don't go as exactly, but moving forward, I definitely want to, because I still feel that there's a lot of ways that I want to grow, and also add more value to myself, so I can add more value um, to my community and society at large. So my plans are mostly essentially I want to so I'm very much excited with I'm working with Samantha McDonald of with and they're starting a volunteers program. So I'm hoping to help get more expertise and also help out and assist with, setting up the futures department of with, and hopefully maybe because I still want to, like I said, I still want to study further. So I still want to either do the future studies degree at Stellenbosch or maybe do something else that's very much futures related and but more in within the tech and science and research and R&D sort of things and kind of doing more of the project development and also management so I can. But my main thing now is also I'm looking into starting up what I my moonshot startup, which is Metamorph, which is looking into the field of which is looking into synthetic biology, personal medicine, and essentially the main goal is human augmentation or enhancement. I like to think the way I phrased it is the moonshot or the massive transformational purpose of it is how do creating an organization that delivers people's best individualized health outcomes and I'm also trying to help someone start, also trying to help start, a sort of Afrofuturist or a transhumanist think tank within South Africa and also Africa as well. So those are kind of my
That's
plans that are in the
awesome.
ether
Yeah,
at the
that's
moment.
awesome. We'd love to be involved in that think tank as well. And also like, just keep an eye on some of the things that you're doing. It sounds really interesting. And I think there's a lot of people that would be young people, especially, really excited by some of the things that you're investigating and doing and trying. And what advice would you give to, young people who are interested in these new technologies? And obviously there's not going to be a situation where these jobs are readily available to you.
Mm.
You have to go out and kind of figure it out for yourself. So what advice do you have for them?
I say that when I was in college, where I kind of earned the nickname, which I've actually taken in stride as being the mad scientist of the group. And what you can take away from that is essentially always go for your wildest and most radical solution. Think about and just go for it. And that is when you truly become exponential. So I think like my advice to a lot of people who are my age or younger is always try to find what wakes you up, what is an idea or something that they can like that wakes you up early in the morning and just go for it. And and if you want to go in more in the exponential space, for me it was always a bit of a struggle, kind of finding my niche, but it's because I thought, okay, maybe I'm feeling not that confident. That was because especially that was me in very much like, especially high school at a mid and also at a mid, like first mid second year of college, I was like a bit unsure of myself. And I think you just gotta own it and just go and just keep on investigating, keep on, trying to find that, trying to find that reason and also trying to find like what are the certain holes and like what are the things that you can do within based on whether you're in an African or South African context or even on a like and on the like so on the global stage as well, finding where that just or creating that niche for yourself is I think is the best part, is actually the most efficient solution as well.
Yes, that's definitely important because obviously no, the whole point about futurism is creating, the
Yeah,
paths
the
that you want to follow.
architecture on future essentially,
Yeah.
yes.
So as a futurist, in Africa, what is your vision for Africa and for South Africa? That's different from what we're seeing today.
I naturally I'm always the optimist, and and I think I definitely do think South Africa has a lot of potential, especially and also it's most important like how do you tap into that. So we have a lot of there's a lot of like especially in the biosciences, maybe not a lot of people know this, we have some of the we have do have one of the top laboratories in the world in doing a lot of research in that space. But it's also about how do you get it, and so there's a lot of opportunity for people in that space. But generally, the way I see it is that I think South Africa has a lot of potential for a lot of economic growth and also societal growth as well, is where, especially if we become more future conscious about, and also just being, and especially if we do it in a way that's very, sorry if this is very cliche, but something that we do it in a very, proudly South African way, and something that feels more, something that's very authentic. And so I do kind of, my vision of South Africa is something very much more, it's more, I do, is more of a very much like an Afrofuturistic sort of thing, sort of vision. I personally like to think of it as South Africa going through like a 21st or like a fourth industrial revolution overhaul, essentially. So so yeah, and we're still, and like, just then if you're just looking at, and we're still a pretty young country, and I think so that also means there's a lot of space to grow as well, and also in other spots, and a lot of, and also focusing more on the good, like a lot of the positive news. Like I think what Rwanda is doing, and places like Lagos, and what they're doing in with their infrastructure, doing with infrastructure development is very fascinating, and I'm really excited for the future of additive manufacturing and what that holds, and how do we, and sustainable development. So basically, I think the future is bright. I know I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to say, given what we always see in the news, and it is quite dragging. But it's also about, how do we think about building these features to scale, essentially. What's your vision for 2030, and what do we have to do now in order to get to that vision? So
100% agree with you. I think most of our futurists are along the same path where we have these bright, futures that we're striving towards, and we can see these, pathways to get there, and the change starts now. And I think one of
yeah.
the most important things that you mentioned is just combining your different interests, like you were interested in medicine and
Mm.
biology, and bringing that together with technology. So, for the students out there, for young people who are, looking, into new technologies in the future and what they can do with themselves and new careers, just combine them in different ways and explore that and see where that
Mm.
takes you, because it's not defined yet. The future is not written.
Yes, it's not
You
defined.
get to figure it out for yourself and create the things you want in the world.
We are definitely now in a new paradigm shift. And I think how we can all combine this syncretically is like, it's something that it's like, I really love the term, how do you create a creative economy? And that's definitely something that I also like. This is something that I definitely picked up from learning in college as well. Is like, there's a lot of things that you can do, and it involves a lot of, it's not just one group of people or one person that can, do all these things. It's like, it's very, you need to have like a very, and my advice is also working collaboration with different people who do think, conventionally. So I'm someone who likes to be, I like to be very creative, but also you need someone who's very analytical, who's like, all right, this, and that. And you also need the person who's very much more methodical, and also like, who's very much more present, and also thinking like, hey, we need to do this, and this, and you also need to be more technical, etc., etc. So, and they all contribute to and cross disciplinary teams, what contributes to this creative economy, and this new, that brings a lot of momentum for this new creative economy that we're heading into. So I'm very excited, and I think we all have to think about and we all have to think about being the architects of our own future, and think about what is your moonshot, and going for it.
Thank you. That was awesome. I definitely agree. Everybody has a place in the future, and we all, take our own paths to get there. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and telling us about all your plans for the future and what you're working on. It's really been an interesting conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. It's really been great talking to you as well, and also looking forward to be watching the space on African Futures
Yes,
Academy.
and collaborating together with you in the
Yes,
future.
of course.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.